2 games in and we're already at what is infamously not only the worst Devil May Cry game in the series, but perhaps one of the most disappointing sequels in gaming history. A pretty impressive feat, but holy hell, the legacy Devil May Cry 2 has, and the sour taste it left in fans' mouths has reached legendary status. This is like the Angel of Darkness of Devil May Cry games, that's how much people despise it. Saying that though, I haven't played this game in a long time, and honestly, I don't remember too much about it aside from feeling totally dissatisfied. And now several years later, I'm gonna rediscover why this game received so much negativity.
My guess is because the concept of stylish combat in the first Devil May Cry was just so unique and inspiring back in 2001 that people wanted to see what else Capcom could do with it. I mean, okay, it's not very impressive nowadays and the game has severely aged by hack and slash standards, but at the time, the possibilities seemed endless. Part of the charm of Devil May Cry also came from its over-the-top action and self-aware silliness. I don't know if Dante would necessarily become one of gaming's most popular protagonists, but he certainly did resonate with a lot of players because of his cocky, witty, and nonchalant attitude. So naturally, when a sequel was announced for 2003, it enormously excited everyone who loved the first game, only to then become an emotional roller coaster to those same people once they played it. Critics didn't like it, fans didn't like it, Devil May Cry 2 was and forever will be a gigantic flop. It was pretty messy behind the scenes too. Hideki Kamiya didn't come back for the sequel, and while there was a director during most of Devil May Cry 2's development, it remains a mystery as to who it actually was. Eventually, things were going so far south that Capcom decided to scrap everything and start over with a new director, Hideki Itsuno. I apologize if I mispronounced that. He did not come at a very good time though, because now there were only 4 to 5 months of development time left. Yeah, we're getting all ET 2600 here. Needless to say, that wasn't nearly long enough to create a polished game, and Itsuno would get the short end of the stick, as he's the only director credited in the final product, despite only being there for the last few months. I don't think it was necessarily his fault though, things just didn't go according to plan, and after Devil May Cry 2, Itsuno would stay as the director for future games from day one. But the big question is, what in God's name happened to the second game that they had to redo the whole thing, and why is what we've got now hated so much? Well, let's boot it up on the HD collection, which I'll now be using the PS4 version to play with for the sake of convenience and to make recording easier. Yeah, capturing PS3 footage can be kind of a pain in the ass with having to bypass its HDCP security block, but luckily the PS4 allows me to turn that off with just the press of a button. I also briefly went back to the original Devil May Cry in this collection, and while the increase in resolution was minor, I personally found it to be nicer and slightly more crisp compared to the PS3 version. Probably won't be terribly noticeable to some of you, but if that didn't convince you, the cutscenes now all have subtitles instead of only the bosses. Oh hell, if I knew that, I would have said get this over the 7th gen versions just for that alone. I would have preferably liked better sound mixing so I wouldn't have to use subtitles, but I'll take this over not understanding what everybody's saying. Right, enough dallying, let's play Devil May Cry 2. It's not exactly clear how long it's been since the first game, but we open up with Dante and the new character, Lucia, investigating this museum for an artifact called a Medallia. Lucia then takes Dante to meet her mother, Matiere, who apparently fought alongside Sparta to defend her land against demons. Matiere asks that Dante kills this businessman named Arius, who's granting himself ultimate power from the underworld to take over this world. Dante flips a coin to determine whether he's going to help because I guess he doesn't need money anymore, but luck seems to be in Matiere's favor. Meanwhile, from Lucia's perspective, she confronts Arius pretty early on and is told that she's his creation that could become a monster and turn on the humans at any moment, but this doesn't lead anywhere, so why even bother bringing it up? Later on, Lucia meets up with Dante again as she gives him the last of the Arcana, a group of items that Arius needs to raise the demon Argisax, with the Medallia they found earlier being one of them. Dante eventually finds Matiere to pass the Arcana onto her, but she informs him that Lucia's been captured after trying to fight Arius, so he'll need to trade the Arcana for her life instead. He does just that, and Lucia is now free, but Arius uses black magic to force her and Dante out of his building. Doesn't stop them for very long though, as they find him again in a fairly short time, and Dante interrupts his ritual, beginning one of the most half-assed boss fights I've ever seen. Not just because the battle itself is kinda dull, but Arius doesn't seem to give a crap either. He's just laying back. Oh yeah, I'll shoot you I guess, I don't really care. Arius is defeated, but right out of nowhere a portal to the demon world has emerged, with Argisax waiting inside. Dante uses that damn coin again to determine their fate, and it appears he'll be the one to go in. Lucia has to fight a possessed Arius who goes down like a bitch, while Dante battles Argisax, with actually an interesting idea of mashing up old and new bosses into a conglomerate mess, like the head of Phantom shooting fireballs while the Griffin shoots his lasers. But that idea fades away as Argisax appears to have a second form that's a little more generic, and he gets properly taken care of as well. The portal is closed, Dante rides away on his motorcycle, and Lucia is left to ponder if Dante survived, which we as the audience already know. And it turns out that both sides of his coin have heads, meaning he had no doubts of surviving. Why does he even carry that around, just for good luck? Anyway, sometime later in Devil May Cry, Lucia hears Dante's motorbike outside, and that's the last we'll see of her in this series, I'll tell you now. Yeah, that was a story. It's okay, I suppose. It didn't really help the characters grow at all, and the villain's a cartoon throwaway. It just felt like another day at the office. They go in, they do their job, and then that's it. At least the first game had some personal stakes involved, but any attempts of drama the second game tries to throw was pretty pathetic, and frankly, I don't think it cares either. I guess the story could have been worse overall, but it also could have been so much more. Lucia's story doesn't even keep you up to speed with what Dante's doing on his end. The game assumes that you played as him first and already know what happens. Devil May Cry 2 kind of just wants to get itself over and done with. Like that part in the shop was only shown post-credits, and both endings with Dante and Lucia are less than a minute. There's none of that crazy charm to the game either. The action's pretty weak compared to the first game, and cutscenes just amount to a lot of talking, which I wouldn't mind so much if I gave a damn about what was going on. Dante's not even that witty this time. It's there in places, but it isn't very good overall. This is a lesser Dante than what we had before, and Lucia's as compelling as dry toast.
What else do you want me to say? The story simply seems like an afterthought and an utter waste of potential to continue the mythos. But that's not saying the gameplay is any better either.
At first glance, Devil May Cry 2 may look very similar to the original game, but trust me, it's got plenty of changes that didn't need to be changed. You know what, let's get the good stuff out of the way first, because yes, believe it or not, the second game does do a couple of things right. Graphics, for instance, are a bit of a step up from the original. A few of the environments may look a little too bleak at times, and some of the enemies are a tad last gen, but the character models and cutscenes are quite good for the PS2 era. The lighting on Lucia during gameplay can be sort of odd though, as it makes her appear somewhat cel-shaded. I'm not sure if that's an issue with the HD version, but just thought I'd point that out. Your stylish rank is also a little easier to maintain than last time. In the original, getting hit even once would immediately bring you down to the lowest rank, causing you to start over, and you basically had no time to dally if you wanted to keep the flow going. You'd think the guns would help with that, but unfortunately, as for that game, they didn't do anything to stop your rank from dropping. Devil May Cry 2, on the other hand, while you still can't weave in and out of battles without diminishing your grade, you can at least now use your guns and knives to indefinitely conserve it. This is the only game you'll be able to do this though, as the sequels only let you use guns to prolong your rank for a very limited time. Although another great feature debuting in the second game is the ability to swap between guns to save going through menus and keep a consistent pace. As well as that, we've got a couple of new tricks up our sleeves, like running up and across walls, which I don't really use myself, but I imagine it's handy in tight spots. And this also marks the debut of one of my favorite abilities in the series, Rainstorm. It doesn't hurt a lot, but it looks cool as hell. In addition, as you can see, Devil May Cry 2 now offers 2 characters to play with instead of 1, and they both control perfectly fine. Dante's roughly the same as he was in the original, and Lucia's a bit faster with her attacks as well as using throwing knives instead of guns, but I don't think she does quite as much damage. I can't quite confirm that. A majority of Lucia's levels are exactly the same as Dante's, which I'm not crazy about, but at the very least she does have less than a handful of exclusive stages, mostly underwater, so take that as you will. Beating Dante's campaign on hard mode will even unlock Trish to play as for the first time. That's pretty cool. Activating Devil Trigger doesn't change her form, which is kinda lame, but she can still kick some ass fairly well. I had to use a cheat code to unlock her though. I would have done it properly, but guys, this game just isn't fun to play. There may be 2 characters to control plus Trish, but all of them have some pretty sluggish combat. To be fair, the original was sluggish too, but at least that one allowed you to upgrade your moveset to make battling demons more enjoyable. Devil May Cry 2 does not do that at all. You are stuck with what you have from the beginning to the end. Oh, you can still upgrade yourself, but only an increase in strength for your weapons and guns, as well as your health and Devil Trigger for some outrageous prices. You cannot buy any more moves, which is one of the major problems with the second game. The Devil form could equip a number of amulets that provide different properties like speed and elemental attacks, but that's all you've got. Fighting does not get any more complex than what you start with. It's too simplified and watered down for what's supposed to be a successor to a game that was all about style. You may have multiple weapons to choose from, but that doesn't mean a damn thing because they're all just different variations of the same sword, like an extended reach or more power. And certain firearms are clearly better than others, like the submachine guns. The enemy respawn rate is also way higher than it was last time. Frankly, too high. There were plenty of moments where I got so fed up of fighting the same group of baddies in the exact same spot that I just run by them, which is one of my biggest sins in gaming. Actually, come to think of it, this game commits another one of my sins with the environments. They're larger and more spacious than they were in the original, but there is absolutely no reason for it. Take a shot every time you're just wandering through a big empty wasteland with nothing crossing your path. Where is everybody? Are there any people in these buildings, or did they all flee because of the utterly drab colors in this place? Even when there is action though, you won't be able to focus on it because you're too distracted by the shitty camera. It cannot make up its mind where it wants to go, constantly going back and forth between Dante, the enemies, or the fixed camera angles to the point that it becomes more troublesome than helpful. I'm pretty sure at least 70% of my playthrough was just shooting at demons off screen because I can't see what I'm attacking. Look at the encounter with the pursuing helicopter. This isn't a boss fight. I'm just continuously mashing the shoot button until I win. Bosses in general are a lot easier than before, and I found that strategies kind of turn into a pattern. Activate devil triggers, shoot like a madman, and keep striking until the meter fills back up, lather, rinse, repeat. The only ones that gave me a lot of trouble were the Argosac spikes and this motherforker near the end of the game. I swear his attacks are next to impossible to avoid at times, and there's barely any opportunity to hit him with your sword. I somehow had an easier time with Lucia, but that may have just come to prior practice.
I'm quite amazed that 16 years later, Devil May Cry 2 is still considered the black sheep of the series. There are just so many weird omissions and changes that didn't sit well with a lot of folks. Even something as trivial as the unlockable costumes don't feel right. It's just consumerism for Diesel, in case you think denim jackets are still hip these days. This game will always be known as the crowning achievement of failure for the Devil May Cry series, and even if you're not a fan of the games, I'm sure you can see why it was such a big letdown.
Devil May Cry 2 may not be the worst game I've ever played, but Jesus Christ does it get boring. At least Dante's campaign's only 3.5 hours long with 18 missions, and Lucia's is even shorter with 13 missions. Why did this game even come out on 2 discs if there's so little content for both characters? There's the bloody palace, I suppose, that you can do afterwards. You crawl your way through many floors of enemies, and yeah, that's about it. It's a good way to rack up the red orbs, and it'll become a series staple, but this game was already a chore to play. I don't feel the need to do anymore. It's strange though, because I reckon if Devil May Cry 2 came out before the original, then maybe it would have stood a better chance and we'd simply shrug off some of the flaws for being the first game. But because this did come out after the first game, we see how many steps back it took and basically turned itself into a neutered version of the original. I guess it's not as drastic as, say, going from Kingdom Hearts 1 to Chain of Memories, but it's still pretty damn bad. I also asked myself a very interesting question as I was writing down notes for this review, and that was, what did I just do in this game? I could not recall what I had been doing. I only just played this game and I can barely remember anything about it, so not only is this game a snore fest, it's also forgettable. I've played 60+ hour RPGs with greater memories than Devil May Cry 2. I guess they had to include this one in the HD collection because it'd be weird just having the first and third games, but I'd still only recommend playing it if you're already a die-hard fan of the series. You won't be missing anything at all if you decide to skip it, not that there's much of an overarching story anyway.
You're better off simply jumping ahead to Devil May Cry 3, which is what we'll be discussing after the next video, not only a prequel to the other 2 games, but also seen as the best Devil May Cry game ever made. And I can wait. I've got a couple of games in mind for the next review, but I haven't decided which one I'll do yet. I'll hopefully see you then, and in case I don't, I'll see you for Devil May Cry 3. Take care. 2 games in, and we're already at what... Jesus. I keep running out of breath. The legacy Devil May Cry 2 has, and the sour face it left in Tan's mouth? What? I'm gonna run out of water at this rate. This is like the Angel of Darkness of Tomb... What?